Welcome to Siliconsciousness, the DSR Network podcast focusing on the artificial intelligence revolution, politics, and policy.
This podcast is underwritten in part by the U.S. Embassy of the United Arab Emirates. Its editorial content is completely independent, and the views expressed are exclusively those of participating experts. It is presented live, without editing. For further information about the UAE's efforts in the areas of artificial intelligence and technology, go to the website of the embassy at www.uae-embassy.org and search for UAE-US Tech Cooperation. We thank them for their support. We thank everybody who's supporting this podcast for their support, and we look forward to it developing and growing over time because the issue is so important. Hello and welcome to Siliconsciousness. I'm David Rothkopf, your host, and we are here, as we are every single week, to talk about issues that arise associated with artificial intelligence and related technologies. This week, we are especially glad to have a friend, Renée DiResta, who is a writer and researcher who studies how adversaries exploit digital platforms to manipulate, harass, or target individuals and societies. She is a former research manager at the Stanford Internet Observatory, and she's the author of Invisible Rulers: The People Who Turn Lies into Reality. Hi, Renée. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to be here.
Great to have you with us. We've talked about some of the issues in your book and prior podcasts, but I'm going to zero in on some very AI-related issues, and I want to start with one that may seem kind of even more narrow gauge, but I think it illustrates a bunch of the issues afoot. You've mentioned that your work increasingly touches on child safety issues intersecting with generative AI. What specific threats do you see emerging from AI in this context, and how can platforms respond effectively to protect children, and how can we respond effectively to protect children?
Yeah. The work that my colleagues and I did when I was at Stanford Internet Observatory looked specifically at how generative AI could be used to produce images of children. So some of this takes the form of using AI to produce images of real children or teens. People who are listening may have read about what are called Undress Me apps. They made it easy to, you could take a photo of a classmate and then you could undress them with the click of a button. This is, of course, the sort of thing that, kids did for harassment purposes. Some of them thought that they were just playing a prank. The problem is when you create these kinds of images, they go everywhere. They don't stay confined. They're also illegal, it turns out, right, to create a nude image of your classmate. And so kids didn't really... they weren't really necessarily thinking in those terms. That's the sort of less egregious. You can also imagine all of the different ways in which AI is being used to create images of children in other contexts as well. So these kinds of content, sometimes it's taking images of real people through the Undress Me apps. Sometimes it's creating images of people who don't exist. But in both cases, I think the law hasn't really caught up to understanding what the impact of this is on the victims or how to think about it, how to address it. As far as social media platforms, on most platforms, this kind of content is a massive violation of the terms of service. Anyway, as I mentioned, some of it is explicitly illegal. Some of it does fall into this legal gray area, but it is not the sort of thing that they would want under their own terms of service to be available to the public. So it's really a case of improving the enforcement of their existing policies to be more diligent about taking it down, responding to it, flagging it to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children if they encounter it, doing multiple of those types of actions simultaneously. I think one of the other areas in which this is coming up in the context of platforms is that you are seeing this kind of content used for sextortion scams, where people who have these nudes generated of them then receive a message from somebody who says, hey, I have these pictures of you and I'm going to release them to the world if you don't pay me or, give me something else, that whatever it is that they want. So I think platforms also have a real responsibility now to more aggressively track and disrupt those kinds of sextortion rings, those kinds of financially motivated attacks that are using platform chat tools in order to connect with their victims. So several different ways that platforms could be prioritizing this. I think in some cases, again, they have the policies. It's just a matter of handling the enforcement, and that's been big. One of the big gaps.
One of the things that has struck me recently is that as a policy, some website is going to start by saying all AI generated material has got to be identified as such. It's got to have a little bug or a watermark or something that says this is AI. And we're going to enforce this on our site so that our viewers, our audience, knows the difference. Does that sound to you like the kind of value added that might start to differentiate sites from one another?
So it's an interesting challenge. The question really is the technological feasibility of this. So let me kind of give a little bit of an example. So you can generate an image from scratch, right? I can go to Midjourney or wherever else, tell it, make me a three-eyed cat, right? And I can have that picture and I can put it up. And this is not you see these like kind of surrealistic, artsy images, things that are just tweaked ever so slightly to be sort of sensational.
Well, initially, all the AI images had 3 eyes or 6 fingers, right? So
this is true. I was maybe not the best example. In my head, that was like a kind of moment. We actually have my daughter has one of these like weird monster animals that I was thinking of. The little like stuffies they make around this time of year. But anyway, point is, you generate the image and then you upload it. For something like that, when it's a wholly generated image, there's a couple things that are happening right now. One, the image generators themselves, the companies that produce the models that generate images, visual content, if they are large companies, they are already likely participating in efforts to do what's called watermarking, which is when they return that image, when I get my cat picture, there is a machine readable watermark that a platform, for example, like Facebook, could conceivably read and then indicate that the content in it is made with AI, imagined with AI is the sort of phrase that they've come up with. But there's another kind of dynamic that's happening, which is people are using AI to edit pictures that are real. So let's say you take an image, you take a picture of, there's an example that happened in real life on Threads. You take a picture of Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji is a real thing. Everybody's, this photographer was physically there, but then he used some Adobe photo editing tools to edit the image, make it look more artistic, remove, solar flares, these sorts of things. And then what happens though is that was also being tagged as an image generated with AI. And the question of at what point is the image generated or edited so in such a way that you would want that watermark up there, that's become one of these real questions. What does the user need to know? What is the value of communicating this to them? Is it to try to avoid deception? If so, is that photo of Mount Fuji with the solar flare removed deceptive? No, it's really not. So this is not really necessarily the use case that people are envisioning when they're asking for watermarking. The other thing to understand, though, is that outside of the readily available image generators, you have what are called the open source models, right? So these are community contributes to the code. These are not controlled by any single regulatable entity. And so they are not really interested in watermarking. And so you have this entire ecosystem of content that's being created. And this is ironically where a lot of the child safety kind of issues are happening, is in the open source model community. And so they're not going to produce that watermarking. So the question becomes, when a platform is determining what to show, if it does not show that something is watermarked, but it shows that a lot of other things are, you don't necessarily want users to have this illusory truth effect where they think, oh, this isn't labeled as watermarked, ergo it must be real, because it very well might be generated by an open source model that doesn't do the watermarking. So this question of how do you create this kind of technological surface for doing that kind of information is not just as simple as having the watermark. There's a whole lot of other things that intersect. I think watermarking is valuable. I think it's useful as part of a tiered defense, maybe, but it's not. I think what people are hoping that it's going to be.
Is moderation or machine assisted moderation? I mean, can AI help fight AI?
So that's actually a really interesting research area. It's not mine, so I only know about it secondhand. But right now, that's actually an area that people are looking at quite closely. In the realm of, so there's machines detecting the visual outputs of other machines. There's a pretty well established set of research there. But as far as something like text-based moderating text content, even real text produced by real people, there's a sense that using large language models and generative AI to evaluate text, for example, will be better at understanding context than untrained human moderators, because you can fine-tune models to understand kind of in-group language that communities use. So you might actually get better AI moderators now that this technology is advancing in the way that it is. It's certainly an area that a lot of people are spending a lot of time on right now.
Yeah, because I want to know, does JD Vance really look that way? Is he really that thin now all of a sudden? As we've seen the pictures, or last night, I was going through Twitter or someplace, and there was there were auroras visible across the Northeast. I don't know if you
saw those pictures. That was another one of these, like, is this real?
Right. And then people started doing AI enhanced auroras. And
Right.
so you were getting people saying, wait, that's not what this looked like. How malign is that? How dangerous is it? I don't know. But, one of the big problems that we face that is sort of at the center of a lot of the work that you do is that the more stuff out there that isn't true, the less you trust, the more that somebody who wants to bend the truth, that's an aurora last night, but tomorrow night it could be a Jewish space laser. Look, I saw the Jewish space laser. And it would be there and it's just going to become harder and harder for people to tell. And so there is a big onus on ordinary people sorting through this stuff. I mean, you said you have a daughter. How do you do it with it? How do you do it?
So my older two kids are 10 and 7, and my daughter's the middle one. She's the 7-year-old. I actually, when Midjourney came out, I have an account, and I actually sat down with them, and we generated a bunch of images of cats together.
3-eyed cats.
I did.
So it's like, why are Renee's kids so weird? That's.
What was really funny actually is there were moments there when I was asking it to generate stuff, and I was thinking, like, please don't return something grotesque. I was trying to use it as a lesson in, like, look at these interesting things we can do. I showed them, like, look, we can generate one in the style of Picasso, in the style of, like, Van Gogh, in the style of, like, Geiger, make an alien cat. Because I wanted them to see, like, what it was like. Then I asked it to generate a bunch of, like, photorealistic stuff. So they've seen this evolve over time with me since around, 2023, early 2023, I think. So they've had about 2 years. So they've watched the models develop. And my 10-year-old said something really funny to me the other day, which was he had to do a project on pirates. He was making a history of pirates, and he wanted a cover image for his slide. He's like, so I generated a bunch of pirates, and I used these because they didn't have any anatomical oddities, was the phrase he used. And I was like, oh my God, this is the weirdest thing. I would have gone to, it's like, what do I do here? I actually don't even know. Like, ethically, what do I tell him? So no, it's a strange thing. I want them to understand the capabilities. I want them to understand the capacity. I want them to know that things aren't real. And I felt like by showing them what it could do and how it could produce content, I would get that point across. They've also seen some of my. He came in once when I was writing this paper on AI spam and scams, which maybe we can talk about because I think it's actually in some ways more impactful than disinformation right now. And I had this cover image for the paper, which was Jesus rendered as a consortium of shrimp, as shrimp Jesus was the title we gave to this meme for the paper. And he just came in and he was like, what are you doing? So I think for young kids, actually, they get it. They know how to generate it themselves. It's something that they just, again, even in fifth grade, they're already doing. It's actually older people, I think, who we see being taken in a little bit more because they're not necessarily out there generating stuff themselves and experimenting with it. And so a lot of the spam and scams are targeting people who are older, who are not necessarily paying attention to technological advances. They just see something on Facebook. They think the image is real, and they start to engage with these scammers who are trying to, sell them pets that don't exist, products that don't exist, trying to get them to go take action on certain websites, that sort of thing. So it is a question of creating literacy. And honestly, I do think like having somebody generate their own stuff does kind of show them pretty quickly like what's possible.
So you're saying all the olds are out there going, oh, wait, Jesus was made of shrimp? I had no idea.
The shrimp Jesus was the picture that, as we were doing this work, one of my colleagues had it pushed to his wife by a Facebook recommendation algorithm, and it just blew us away. It was just so extraordinary. Actually, it's funny. A lot of the comments under it just said "Amen." It had millions of engagements and views. This weird picture. Maybe it's hundreds of thousands, but the millions of views on the fake kitchens, hundreds of thousands on shrimp Jesus. But people engage with this stuff in really surprising ways. A lot of the time, the shrimp Jesus is obviously sensational. Everybody knows that is not, most people I would think know that that's not real. But a lot of the time it's a picture of like a person sitting alone with a birthday cake. It's my birthday. Nobody said happy birthday to me, right? They write these captions that are very heart-wrenching. Or kids who look like they're in poverty and, saying like, can I get a like or some support, right? And so that kind of stuff goes out to people, and you do see real people engaging with the images and responding. And so there is something about them, like they do hit the right emotional buttons for people. And that's one of the things that I think makes the spam and scams particularly an interesting area to study.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason, I feel compelled to say that there are people out there who would say the shrimp Jesus is just as real as the real Jesus. But I'm not going to get into the theological discussion here. But what was the thrust of the paper?
So the paper just looked at we started it in December of last year. We just started gathering data on these pages because we had begun, me in particular had started getting recommended this content. And once you engaged with a little bit of it, you got a ton more. So we were very interested in why the platforms were pushing it out to people. Because I wasn't going and soliciting these pictures. I wasn't typing in anything that would indicate that I had an interest in them. But once you engaged with some, like I made the mistake of spending a long time scrolling this page of AI generated kitchens because I was looking at the tells in the images. The sink doesn't have a faucet. The stool has an extra leg, these sorts of things. And I spent an awfully long time lingering on that stupid AI generated kitchens page. And I cannot tell you, we're now in October of 2024, 10 months later, I am still at least twice a day getting some stupid picture of an AI generated kitchen, and I can't make it stop. So one of the one of the things that we were doing was just looking at what kind of engagement is this content getting? What are the creators of the page doing? How are they monetizing? Like, why are people creating hundreds of pictures of AI generated kitchens?
Does seem like a natural question.
They make money. There's the natural answer, right?
How is it they're making money, and why am I in the wrong line of work?
I feel that too. You can go on YouTube actually, and you can watch some of these folks detail exactly how they do it. And there are certain parts, Facebook doesn't have necessarily the same, I think monetization programs, I think that they vary a little bit by region is the sense I'm getting, because there is a collection of folks in Southeast Asia who have decided that this is like extremely lucrative, and they make YouTube videos about how to do it, and they actually sell courses in how to do it.
Wait, how to make AI versions of kitchens?
How to make AI that catches attention and gets monetized. They get paid per view. If a lot of people are viewing and engaging with the content, they're getting paid.
And the people are viewing the kitchens because they're renovating their kitchen, or because
it's like, it seems that people just really like this aesthetically, like a like aspirational. I guess it's the equivalent of like going and buying some like Better Homes and Gardens subscription in the olden days, maybe.
So it's like HGTV.
There you go.
It's love it or list it for kitchens, right?
Right. I mean, some of the kitchens are, if like they're aspirationally beautiful, I guess is a way to put it. It's you see these things for like tiny houses, for log cabins, for bohemian decor. These are ones that I've been served. Again, I really, honestly, in my day-to-day life, I just could not give a shit about like home decor, but I engage with it and it decides I want more. And so now at this point, it's almost like a hate scroll process where I just see these things multiple times a day. Anyway, the point is though, once people have signaled that they're interested in this stuff, they get more of it. And so if you are actually a person who likes this stuff, maybe you find it, people comment on them. What a beautiful home. I love this renovation. I love this chair. Where did that light come from? And then sometimes you see, unfortunately, the scam ones, you'll see the people who created the content respond with, oh, I'll send you a link to buy it, right? And so you'll see fabulous knit sweaters that couldn't exist in the world. They kind of defy the laws of physics, but nonetheless, people think that they're seeing something real. And then there's a transaction that you can, go to the scam website and check out, and God knows what actually shows up. But that's one of the processes.
Interesting. I feel like that there's a thread to pull on in that scam sweater, because the more you look at this stuff, the more the AI can determine what you like. And the more it determines what you like, the more it can create things that are suited to your likes. It can sort of lead you down a rabbit hole of your own aspirations. But before we run out of time, we are in the last 3.5 weeks of an election cycle. And so disinformation is at the forefront of everybody's mind. And so, in order to take a break from the election cycle, I went to the BBC and I watched a show called The Capture. I don't know if you've watched The Capture. It's from a couple of years ago. And it's about image manipulation and how the government and other kinds of people use it to dupe people. It's about deep fakes, really, and it's kind of good, but it does raise the issue. I think a lot of people feared that at some point, because we're still relatively naive regarding deep fakes, 3 days before the election, a video of Kamala Harris or doing something horrible would emerge. And it would take 4 days for everybody to understand it was a fake. And the election would be over before that happened. And it would make a difference. It would become viral. Half the people wouldn't care whether it was true or not, but the other half would be wondering about it. Do you worry about this kind of thing as a reality in the context of the current election?
So video, no. Video, there's enough that, that is, there are enough tells. It's hard to produce a very convincing video. I think the more interesting means would be audio, a leaked hot mic moment, fake leaked hot mic, one of those sorts of things, because people we've had several, I think there was a Romney one, if I'm not mistaken, a few years back, right? There was There was obviously the Trump Access Hollywood tape. The sort of leaked audio kind of plays a role in American elections and psyche. And so it wouldn't be surprising to see something like that happen. Would it be of a famous person? I think possibly not, actually. I think what you might see is more in the context of like the vote counting after the fact, right? There'll be areas where, unfortunately, it's very, very likely in this election that it will be very close. And then there will be allegations made about the fairness of the vote. And you'll see that happen in particular small local jurisdictions, kind of areas that are very, very tight, separated by only a few hundred, few thousand votes. And that's where I would think you would see a little bit more in the way of faked audio in which you hear somebody say, like, did we bring the extra votes in? Something along those lines, creating a perception that the election has not been fair. So that is my personal concern, would be something more like that playing
And
out.
where and who's the police?
Well, there are different groups that are, so for something like audio, there are different groups that work to authenticate. These things are authenticatable. They are not foolproof. We have not hit a point where you can't tell. It's a question of how quickly can you do that. And the other piece of it, though, besides how quickly can you do that, because there's teams like Hany Farid's team out at Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken, and there's True Media that's looking at these things. There's a few different groups that are working very hard on that authentication piece, who will be able to do authentication, again, depending on the format of the content. Different ones will do it. But there is a question of, do people believe the authentication? Like, do people believe the fact check, so to speak? And that's the other kind of challenging dynamic for where we are in election 2024, which is there are going to be people who might not trust the fact check when it comes out. So if there is a faked piece of content and the checker says, no, this is fake, then there still has to be widespread agreement among the public. They have to trust that finding. And so there's a lot of different things that are intersecting in what I think is a crisis of trust. Not so much, the problem is not so much the content creation capacity. Problem is the low trust environment that we're operating in now.
Yeah, it's very unsettling, and it seems increasingly likely that this is what's going to happen. I this week I picked up the Washington Post, or actually I don't actually pick up the Washington Post. I looked at it online, and it said, "Click here to listen to a podcast that was entirely generated by AI." Yeah. And it was a conversation between two AI bots talking about some Microsoft policy. And I started listening, and I was like, if I did not know, I would have no idea.
Yeah, the audio is very, very convincing. It is really, it's very surprising, I think. Again, that's where, with the efforts to kind of inform people that this sort of thing is possible now, I remember some of the early efforts to do it required audio of like, you had the faked stuff that of famous people that used like Joe Rogan or President Obama, because they had a whole lot of audio out there. You could make something very plausible that sounded like them, but that sort of sample size is smaller and smaller. And then you have, as you note, these sort of wholly generated, completely, machined people who are able to generate interactive seeming conversations between each other. So the technology advances very, very quickly at this point, and helping the public understand what is possible is certainly a piece of it. But unfortunately, the other piece of that is when people realize that this is possible, it exacerbates that crisis of trust.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's very important for us to be able to talk to you, Renée. We're very grateful. And people should go out and get your book and read it. And if Renée's book's not available, Renée's 10-year-old, I think, is pretty up to speed on these things. And I think there will be an entire generation of people who are a little bit more discerning because they will grow up with it. In any event, I think this is a conversation we'd like to continue. I hope you will come back again.
Happy to.
And I will spend the next hour or so looking at AI-generated kitchens,
they will never stop.
They will never stop coming. Because I just didn't even know that was a thing. But in any event, thank you very much, Renée. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We are here with Scylla Consciousness every week, sometimes more than once a week. So join us again. And until then, bye-bye.